and welcome to the Parkinson Foundation Wellness Wednesday. My name is Jenny Fearday, and I am the Community Engagement Manager for the Parkinson Foundation. I'm so excited to welcome you to the very first Parkinson Foundation PD Health at Home session focused specifically on the male caregiving experience. Today's program is pre-recorded. However, we do encourage you to submit your comments on the chat button, and we will address as many questions as possible. You can also reach the Parkinson Foundation helpline with your questions by calling 1-800-4PD-INFO, or you can email them at helpline@parkinson.org. As we begin, we want to welcome you and take a moment to share the mission of the Parkinson Foundation. Every day and in everything we do, we are working to make life better for people with Parkinson's. To achieve our mission, we pursue three goals: improve care for everyone with Parkinson's, advance research toward a cure, and empower and educate our global community. Today's program is a great example of one of the things we are doing to help us meet these goals. One example of our mission in action is PD generation. This research offers genetic testing for PD-related genes and genetic counseling to people with Parkinson's at no cost. Commit to helping us advance Parkinson's research today. Check your eligibility and enroll now to be part of PD generation at parkinson.org/PD generation. We want to hear from you. Let us know what you think of our PD Health at Home program and how we can continue to improve our work. Please watch for a survey at the end of our program, and you'll also receive it in a follow-up email. I'd like to take a moment to recognize that PD Health at Home is presented by the Light of Day Foundation, whose generosity has made this programming possible. The Parkinson's Foundation has been providing weekly educational and wellness programs virtually through our PD Health at Home series, including Mindfulness Mondays, Wellness Wednesdays, and Fitness Fridays. As a reminder, all programs are held at the same time, 1 p.m. Eastern Time. You can learn more and register for these programs by visiting parkinson.org/PD Health. Today's program is focused on male caregivers and care partners. A recent 5-year review of first-time calls to the Parkinson's Foundation helpline made by a family member or someone living with Parkinson's found that male care partners are calling the helpline less often than female care partners. When looking specifically at spouses, with most of these calls representing heterosexual partnerships, the findings were particularly striking. Nearly 82% called about a male partner with Parkinson's, meaning only about 18% represented the partner of a woman living with Parkinson's. Women represent 40% of Parkinson's cases, so male care partners of women with Parkinson's contact a helpline significantly less than female care partners of men with Parkinson's. This disparity supports what others have seen, both in Parkinson's care specifically and for chronic conditions in general. This suggests a need for increased outreach to male spouses or partners to ensure that they can access information and resources about Parkinson's to support their caregiving role, which would have a positive impact on both the man providing care as well as their partner with PD. While the findings from the helpline focused largely on men caring for their wives with Parkinson's, we're prioritizing the voices and experiences of men caring for many different loved ones with Parkinson's, and today we'll highlight several different experiences and perspectives on Parkinson's and caregiving. And now we will play the pre-recorded program.
Hello, I'm Annie Brooks, Director of Education at the Parkinson's Foundation, and I am so excited to welcome you to the very first Parkinson's Foundation PD Health at Home session focused specifically on the male caregiving experience. Today's program is pre-recorded, so we won't be able to respond to your questions in real time, but we hope that you'll still share your questions and comments in the chat, because we'll be compiling them and looking for themes for future programming specific to this population. You can also reach out to the Parkinson's Foundation helpline with your questions by calling 1-800-4PD-INFO, or you can email them at helpline@parkinson.org. Today, we'll be hearing from Parkinson's care partners, Tom Graffio, Chad Moore, and Bernard Coley. And our session will be facilitated by Lance Wilson, who is a social worker and education and outreach coordinator at Jefferson Health Comprehensive Parkinson's Disease and Movement Disorders Center, a Parkinson's Foundation Center of Excellence. Now, you'll notice when Lance is chatting, Bernard is not part of the conversation. As is often the case with Parkinson's, life got a little unpredictable, and Bernard was not able to join as planned with the other two male care partners. So I took out some time to have a similar conversation with him, and we'll share that with you at the end after we hear from Lance, Tom, and Chad.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome to the Male Caregiver webinar. My name is Lance Wilson. I am the social worker, education, and outreach coordinator for Thomas Jefferson University's Parkinson's Disease and Movement Disorder Center, and I am acting as your moderator today for some of these conversations that we're going to have. So, Tom, do you just want to give a brief introduction to who you are?
Sure. Good afternoon. Thank you, Lance. My name is Tom Graffio. I live in Columbus, Ohio, and I have been a caregiver for about 15 years now. My partner was diagnosed about 15, 16 years ago.
All right, and what about you, Chad?
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chad Moore. I live in Massachusetts. I am the executive director of DopaFit Inc. We have Parkinson's movement centers here in Massachusetts. I was a care person for my mother. We like to use the term millennial caregiver, which started very early in my early 20s. I cared for her up until my 30s.
Awesome. So I think what'll be best is if we kind of just dive right in. So the first question, or the first kind of theme that I want to focus on, is where do you think that your gender might have played a part in navigating your care partner role? I'm going to start with Chad, since you as a millennial caregiver is probably a little different than most people think.
Yeah, the age, and also, of course, it was my mother. So the gender plays into that very much so. The age was a difficult thing to navigate, especially, being in my early 20s. And I think, now I have a child, and I will forever see my child as my little son, which I think, she did as well. Trying to then switch that role to where, in some sense, I was acting as the parent would act, and taking care of my mother. And I know that was very difficult for her to work through that transition. I feel that I did pretty well myself, but a lot of it had to do with navigating how she felt, making her feel comfortable. And also, it really boiled down to kind of allowing her to still have some control, and allowing her to, to make the decisions of how she wanted me to help and how I felt that I could help in the best way possible. Now, the gender difference was a bit more difficult, especially with helping my mother dress and get undressed, was something that took a little while for me to get used to. And I'm sure she probably never got used to it. And then, we developed into some incontinence problems as well. And that was, I think, another difficult step for us to navigate. I think for me, what I feel I kind of did best was just go with the flow. Try to make her as comfortable as possible by not me acting as if I'm uncomfortable, no matter how uncomfortable it might have made me feel. And I think, again, trying to do what I could to continue to empower her. She eventually reached the point where buttoning her shirt was very difficult. And, I found a buttoner that helped her for a little while, and just, things to help her keep her independence. And also, again, where, trying to navigate that role of parent-child was probably the more difficult part.
Yeah, I think that anybody in your shoes would absolutely agree that navigating child and parents take care of their children, not the other way around, and all of the things that go along with that. And do you want to weigh in there, Tom?
Yeah, my experience is a little bit different than Chad's. My partner, with the exception of the last couple of years, was working full time, so he did not need as much care, does not need as much care, I feel, is what Chad and a lot of people have to do. So he's pretty self-sufficient, other than some health issues with his back and getting around with a walker. He takes care of all his own hygiene and dressing and all that. So the extent of my caregiving is a little bit different. A lot of mine is more, going to doctor's appointments, driving to doctor's appointments, and that aspect of it. So not so much as actually hands-on with a lot of people have to do.
Okay. I'm curious as to from the caregiver side of things, how you guys experience navigating the healthcare world when you were either learning about diagnosis or was trying to figure out what the diagnosis was that was causing some of the symptoms. You guys want to just, I'll start with Tom since he mentioned it first. What was your kind of healthcare journey to get to where you are?
Yeah, so this was about 16 years ago, 17 years ago, he started having symptoms. And so his doctor referred him to a specialist and basically misdiagnosed him initially, told him he had a non-essential tremor, gave him some medications that would help with the tremor, which really just kind of slowed him down, put him to sleep. He would get drowsy during the day at work. So it definitely was interfering with that. So it did take us a little bit of time to get to the right person, to get to a neurologist and get the right diagnosis. And once he did that, and I say a little bit of time, probably a few months, which in the grand scheme of things probably is not a long time. And I've heard a lot horror stories from other people where they dealt with the issues for years. And then being in Columbus, Ohio, a large city, we have a lot of excellent hospitals. And I think at that point too, kind of more talk was going around about Parkinson's, and the local foundation and chapters were getting out in the community a little bit more. So our journey has not been horrible as far as that goes and getting the diagnosis. Haven't really had any assistance with other areas like social workers and things like that I've heard other people mention, and getting those kind of resources. But the initial diagnosis came fairly early on overall.
Okay. Well, I'm biased because I think social workers are amazing, but who am I? And
Everybody,
Chad,
we all do, but nobody put us in touch with one, and I didn't even realize that was an option. So it's good to know.
yeah, I mean, it sounds like you did a lot of navigating kind of on your own a little bit while trying to dig out that diagnosis. And we'll go into a little more in depth with that in a second. But I want to hear, Chad, how was your journey of navigating the healthcare world?
And I think, like Tom and many other people who are living with Parkinson's disease, went through a troubling diagnosis at first. At least, again, we're going back now probably 20 years when my mother was diagnosed, and a female at would have been 48 years old, Parkinson's, which is not on the checklist. And she really dealt with a lot of non-motor symptoms. So there's the depression and apathy and anxiety that came, and that really, manifested first. So they were working through trying to treat all of that. And, for a good 3 years, we knew something was wrong, just couldn't figure out what it was. And I should say my mother more than we, because I come from that very proud Irish family where, you fall, you rub some dirt on it and you keep going, or you put it under the rug. And, every time you walk out of the house, you have a smile on your face. And she did that and was very brave through it, and eventually got the diagnosis. And I'll never forget when she told me, I was sitting at the kitchen table. She was just getting something out of the cabinet, and she got it and then just turned around, and my back was actually to her the way I was sitting. And she goes, "I have Parkinson's disease," and just kind of blurted it out. And it was just interesting again how that, there wasn't the build up or the sit down. It must have been something that, she was waiting to get out, and it just kind of came out. And that's again kind of the dynamic of, our family in that sense. And after that, we just again kind of swept it on the rug and moved forward until she started to really need some more help. And then that became navigating the health system again with that parent-child relationship. which, you know, having been in healthcare and been in, you know, public health for many years prior to that, I had a decent understanding of the healthcare system, but my mother was also an office manager of medical offices for many, many years. So it was really a delicate balance, and it was more of not being in the, you know, being in these with these doctors, and they ask her how she's doing, and I am doing great. Everything is fantastic. And I'm sitting there, I'm going, you know, Mom, you just fell 5 times last week. You know, your tremors must worse, and these different things. And it was really, and at times I did not do a good job of being able to verbalize that while still allowing her to maintain that independence and that feeling of control of her Parkinson's disease and diagnosis. But there are times where I just had to speak up because I knew it was best for everybody. And she may have at times have gotten mad, but eventually, you know, she understood, because, you know, that, again, that pride sometimes, you know, can weigh heavy on us. But in the end, I think I learned how to, you know, better navigate those situations. She learned how to better handle those situations. And, you know, me and my mother had a, you know, through this, ended up having a much stronger relationship. But it was, again, really being mindful and respectful of each other's position was a big thing. And not getting mad when our personalities shine through in some of these situations, and just understanding this is a hard time for her, a hard time for me. And it ended up, again, you know, working out as long as we were on our P's and Q's with each other, so to speak.
I definitely think, to your point, it's a fine line to walk, because the Parkinson's patient has so many things taken away from them, or things they can't do or control. And if they're, you know, of sound mind and they can speak, and you want them to speak for themselves, you don't want to be correcting them and chiming in. But I find the same thing even to this day that I do, where I will be included or do the driving to the visit, and the doctor will ask a question and I'll pipe up, and I'm like, well, no, that's not the case. You're not sleeping at night. Like, why you tell them that you are? And so I'm like, don't bring me to your appointment if you don't want me to be, you know, chiming in about that. But I even find in my current situation, and I think part of it is based with the Parkinson's, speaking softly, maybe the pronunciation of things isn't as clear, and the doctors look to me and are asking me questions that should be directed at him. And I don't think that's so much, you know, based off of me being a male, but more so the healthcare provider just needs to be aware of, they need to talk to the patient and ask the patient. If they don't reply or they don't give the answers, then we got to take the lead and kind of fill in those blanks. But a lot of times I will look to him and I take my eyes from the doctor to him, almost kind of physically saying, you need to redirect that question to him. He's sitting right there, right next to you. You need to present him with a question. And so again, they need to just be aware that yes, the speech might be soft, but he can hear you and he's sitting right there. So kind of redirecting the conversation sometimes should be going to the patient. And there's been times where I don't go to every visit because they need to have that dialogue between the two of them. And I don't want to take away from that.
Yeah, I think you guys bring up something that's really important, kind of like that, like you mentioned, Tom and Chad, that fine line of where do I jump in? Where do I, and, you know, of course, focusing on patient-centered or person-centered care, a lot of those conversations should be going directly to the person that is impacted. But I do think as care partners and caregivers, there's a lot of, like you said, filling in the blanks that has to happen, because I've sat in the room and I've seen both, you know, a care partner and a patient tell the same story. And I don't know how we got there, because it was something completely different than what the patient was saying they experienced and what the care partner was like, yeah, that's not what's happening. When do you become the advocate? When do you switch hats from care partner to, you know, getting on your soapbox with the megaphone and, you know, kind of trying to help facilitate and kind of figure out what direction to go?
You know, I really think I think it depends on, you know, everybody's personalities are going to be different. You know, when I found out about his diagnosis, I went online and I did research and I started digging around and I found out about the local Parkinson's organizations and got involved with volunteer work early on after that diagnosis. And his very fortunately, his disease has progressed slowly. So that part of his health, he's managing very well and has recently done some different things. But I had to go in and start looking and trying to get some answers and finding out about it. He was doing his own research as well, but so he was being his own advocate, and he actually worked in a hospital at the time, so was able to pull different resources and get opinions from people. But again, kind of did mine separately, not to step on his toes of what he was doing and what he wanted to do. So then when I did go to those appointments, I felt I was a little bit more prepared and a little bit more educated on things that might come up.
What about you, Chad?
So this is a place where maybe I didn't draw the fine line too well. I'm a firm believer that in advocating for yourself and others in the medical field is of the utmost importance. And I definitely took a strong stance sometimes. I even remember a couple elbows or a smack from my mother, like, Chad, well, because again, if you don't ask, you're not going to get it. As much as the healthcare system, is fantastic and helps so many people, the squeaky wheel definitely gets the grease. And, in defense of the doctors, they aren't given much time nowadays. They have a caseload of just patient upon patient. We all know it takes 6 months to get an appointment for any type of specialist, right? So we know how busy they are. And if you don't bring it up, there's a likely chance that they're not going to bring it up. And if it's something that you really feel passionate about, they might have their own bias towards it. But if you have done your research and you feel that it's something that's best for you and the person you're caring for, then you need to fight for it. And you usually get it, again, if it's within means. And I say that in doing it in the most polite way possible. I'm not screaming and yelling at the doctors, but there is a time and place to be stern and kind of put your foot down with, this is what I want for the person that I'm caring for, and let's try to figure out what we have to do to get that.
Yeah, I think that goes back to that concept of person-centered care. If the medical team wants to address symptom 1, 2, and 3, and those are not, as a patient might mention, that's not what I'm focused on, or that's not the biggest issue, why are we not prioritizing what I deem as the issue? And I think that's the more appropriate way to facilitate and navigate healthcare, as you mentioned.
And I think honestly, the care person usually has the eagle-eye view of what's going on. The doctors gets that 15, 20, 30 minutes of visual, and then that 5-10 minutes of you saying that I'm great and everything's fine. So all those other pieces built in. And I think especially people living with Parkinson's disease, again, as a care person, you will see that when they're off, and they might not even recognize that they're off, or that they have been shuffling a lot, or their thoughts have been wandering some more, or their voice has gotten very low. Because there's things like that a person with Parkinson's, they don't really recognize that their voice is low, right? They recognize that people are saying what all the time, but they probably just assume that they're talking to a bunch of people with bad hearing. So it's things like that it is super important for the care person to understand that they have that insight that the doctor might not get otherwise.
And I think too, you want to keep in mind that the doctor is seeing patient after patient, and after a while, maybe they're going in there with the same speech, the same introduction, whatever it happens to be, just because they've said it so much. But sometimes it's nice to kind of reframe the conversation, because oftentimes we go in there with a couple of topics that we want to cover, and they only have so much time allocated because they're on to the next person. And it seems to be at the end, we're running out of time, and and they start to get up out of their chair, and we haven't even talked about the topics we wanted to talk about. And so it's great for them to come in with their agenda and their itinerary, but maybe it needs to be flipped and start with topics that we want to cover and make sure that we get a say in. So we've learned to kind of find a balance between the two. And then after all these years, the first few appointments, or, as your diagnosis or your condition changes, then some things are more important. If you're just going for a routine every 6 months or to see the doctor yearly, then there's maybe not as important things. But early on, I just feel like you have a lot of questions, and you really have to be mindful and do that early on. I'm in sales, and when I talk to my customers or potential customers, I ask them, what's important to you about this? Like, what are you looking to get out of it? I can tell them 10 great things about it, but maybe they only care about 2, and I didn't even cover those 2. And so that's kind of a wasted of everybody's time. So I just think, some suggestion or advice I would give to people maybe newer in the situation, no matter what your roles are, is that you want to make sure that that gets covered earlier on.
Like, what things do you wish as a care partner, and, you know, kind of creating what that role looks like for what that means in your life? What do you wish that you know what do you wish that you knew then that you know now?
Yeah, I mean, nothing really comes to mind because I just really feel like everybody's situation is different. Again, very fortunate that his progression of the disease has been slower, and I've been involved with Parkinson's. I sit on the local board, so I'm definitely engaged with it and subscribe to newsletters and things like that. So definitely very fortunate, especially the last few years, so much more information has been out there and is available. It would have been nice to have left that doctor's office after the first or second visit, maybe with some literature in my hand, you know, things to look for, early warning signs. You know, I could list a bunch of things that Parkinson's Foundation has now. So, you know, it would have been great to have those resources 15 years ago. They didn't exist, but I do feel like that gap has been bridged over time, and that there's been a need for it, and it's been made aware. And I really feel, especially in Ohio, that we've really seen the doctors and the communities and the neurologists all kind of come together and share information and be engaged and do different seminars. So definitely have seen that increase, and probably with technology, and especially the last couple of years, to have access to so much more information.
What about you, Chad?
Yeah, Lance, that's a great question, and it's something that I feel very passionate about. And you know, the major thing that I learned is that taking care of myself meant taking better care of them. Continuing to do the things that I love to do, continuing to set time apart for myself. In my case, you know, it was soccer. I played it in college. It was something that I always did, exercising in general, and I started to get away from it, because that extra time that I might have used playing sports, I was going to doctor's offices, or I was just mentally consumed, you know, with Parkinson's disease and with my mother and what was going on. And I didn't really realize it, but that just really burnt me out mentally and physically. And it inevitably hurt the relationship that I had with my mother, because eventually I crossed that path of not feeling or acting like a child. Their son should act in a lot of different ways, and acting like that care person. And I regret not doing more things for myself. As selfish as that sounds, and as selfish as it would have felt and did feel at times when I did it, the times when I did do something for myself, whether it was a day, you know, a couple of days in a row, when I came back to being that son, child, and most importantly, care partner, I was better for it. You don't realize how irritable you can be sometimes when you and you know, put all of your heart and soul into this. And the second thing is, I would recommend, you know, in my case, you know, child, parent, husbands, wives, so on and so forth, try to find some time to spend with your person within that role. You know, there should have been more mother and son time, but there wasn't, because it became, you know, care partner and, you know, for lack of a better term, patient. And that's something that I really see now in hindsight, would have benefited all of us in the end. So take care of yourself, and you'll be able to take better care of them, and really try to focus on, at certain times, resuming the role of which you were before the person you're caring for was diagnosed.
Yeah, and I think that self-care portion is really, really important. And I can definitely relate to the whole guilt of it. You know, I was in a situation for a time where, you know, one summer I didn't run, I didn't walk, I didn't do some of those outdoor activities that I love, because I've like, he's sitting in this chair and he can't even get up and move around the house all that well. And here I'm getting up at 7 in the morning, putting on my sneakers and going for a run. And I remember just stopping one whole summer, and then I was miserable because I wasn't getting that release and that alone time and that, you know, that workout, that exercise. And so that was, I remember looking back on it, and I'm like, I'm never doing that again. Yeah, I should probably do more than I do, because you do have that battle of feeling guilty and spending time with the person, but you definitely need to take care of yourself. And I definitely think that message is out there for a lot of different things. It's just easier said than done.
And you know, Tom, when you say that, And we talked about doing it out of guilt and not doing it because we didn't want them to feel bad, when if we probably really thought about it, they would want nothing more than for us to continue to do things that we do, almost to the fault where, my mother would almost want me to act like nothing was wrong all the time and just go on with life. And sometimes for some reason, it almost made me feel more guilty, so I definitely think that, those feelings are probably for all of us, and trying to push through it, like you said, was super important for me. And I'm glad to hear that it was super important for you as well.
Yeah, and I do feel like a lot of those things that I was, feeling aggravated about or frustrated were inside. So he didn't even realize like that I needed that outlet, or that I was having that going on inside, because of course you don't want to pile on, I'm not going to talk about my issues because we're trying to help you with your issues. So it's definitely, definitely a balancing act.
And so I think that you guys did you guys don't need me.
Yeah, we do. Don't go anywhere.
No, but that really led into the next part that I was thinking about, which is stress management. And I think that I feel like it's the silent conversation. Everyone knows that caregiving or being a care partner is one of the most stressful titles that you can have. And you guys alluded to some of the ways that you address that stress, or what that stress, that caregiver fatigue or what have you, kind of what you do to try and alleviate some of that. But I really want to dig in a little bit more about how you guys navigated extinguishing the stress, or did you let yourself feel the stress, or did you try to, I know Chad had mentioned, sweep it under the rug and, keep moving. But I really am interested in hearing some of the strategies that you both kind of held on to kind of help navigate that stress, like decompression.
Yeah, I think for me, so first off, I probably relate more to the terms care partner than caregiver. I think when we're together, we're at a seminar or a doctor's appointment. Again, I think because he is so, able at this point in time to be referring to me as a caregiver, I just feel like that takes away from the things that he does, because he does feed himself and bathe himself, and he can drive and do different things like that. So I feel like we're more in a partnership with this. So I know there's different terms, different people say different things, and they don't really mean anything by it, but I relate to that more. And again, just different, there's times now I'll working all day, I'll go home from work, check on a few things, and then I'll lock myself in a bedroom for half an hour and do meditation, or I'll do a bike ride, or I'll read or something, just to have that transition time from work to home. And so, a lot of different things, relieving stress and going out for a run or whatever those things are. Definitely physical things work better for me. Maybe almost exhausting yourself that way, so it makes you stronger in another way. Because I do feel when I don't do that, I can tell, like if I let too many days go by that I haven't done something, I get a little antsy. And it's not because someone told me I couldn't or that I shouldn't, other than myself. So again, just, you're your harshest critic, and you just have to be aware of that. And not everybody likes the physical stuff. Some people, they want to float on a raft in a pool, or, walk around the zoo or whatever, you have to find a couple of things, I think, that work for you and that you enjoy. And for me, part of it is just doing stuff by myself. I don't mind sitting in a room and reading for half an hour. Don't always have to be joined at the hip with somebody or with him or whatever. You definitely need your time apart as well, I think.
Yeah, and for me, again, exercise has always been a big thing for me. And when I used it within this time frame as well, it was very, very helpful. And I also want to plug in, if you're new to the Parkinson's world, exercise is also very important for people living with Parkinson's disease. So exercise for everybody all around. But the big thing again is being able to do some things that are guilt-free, which you'll never be. You'll always feel a little bit guilty, and it's kind of dealing with that. And it's finding those things that you want to do, possibly alone or with friends or with family. And realistically, looking back on one of the only ways to do that is to allow yourself to be helped by other people. If someone offers, hey, I'll come by and watch your mom for a couple hours so you can go do this or that. Again, my first instinct was always, no, I can do it. I'm going to, this is, I'm doing this. I'm big, strong Chad, and I can do everything. And, the times that I did it, allow help was super, super helpful to me and to, my mother, because those people that are offering help, most of them, genuinely want to help, and they want to help you, and they want to help the person that you're caring for. And I'm sure, as much as my, mother loved me as her son, she probably got sick of me at times too, and wanted me to get out of there and leave her alone, or let her do some things with her, her friends or family. So help is out there for a lot of people. I know there's a lot of situations where there's unfortunately nothing you can do, but if someone offers a hand, do your best to take it, swallow your pride, and just take that hand and let yourself get picked up for a little bit. And again, that little bit of help that you may get is just going to help you be a better person for the loved one that you're caring for.
I think a lot of us in the healthcare community and even not are having more conversations about primary and secondary care partners and what that looks like. And I know a thing that comes up a lot for me when I'm speaking to individuals is contingency planning. If for whatever reason you as the primary care partner are unable to fulfill that role at a given point, maybe you have your own health issues, maybe you have something going on with work or with what have you, what does that look like? And I'm starting to realize that a lot of people, it's not a thought because you're caught up in it. You're in the moment of being a care partner. So I'm curious how you guys felt like you navigated that, or if you did the secondary care partners kind of just pop up, or was it more strategic in how you addressed it?
So I can say from my standpoint, it's something that I did a poor job at. It definitely, looking back, there might have been some control issues on my personality where I thought I had everything set up and it was doing great, and it faltered in certain ways. And the one thing is to do that planning would mean to be thinking into the future, which would almost sometimes especially in Tom's case, might be thinking into a future that you don't want to think about. We very much took things as they came, which there's a benefit to, but there was no contingency plan ready if something, if she, had fallen and gotten hurt and broke her hip. And then there's all these things that go into that, and, where they might stay, what's the best rehab facility in your area, and all of these things that, Lance, as as a social worker, that's where we come to you and hope that there will be some help with that. But it's always best if you have some things in line. And those secondary care partners are, again, those are the people that you didn't realize would be considered secondary caregivers. They're friends and other family members and people that are offering help. And, again, it just comes back to allowing other people to help as well.
And I think for our situation, again, not really sitting down and planning something, but just kind of happened organically. Or, if I have to go out of town for work or even for fun for a few days, he can be left alone. So it's not to that extent. But hey, check in with him, call him, stop by the house just to make sure, he hasn't fallen or something crazy. So it does happen, again, with family and friends. So there are people that I know, as things come up or if something happens, that I can reach out to them and they can kind of fill some of those gaps.
That's awesome, because I think that is like you mentioned, Chad, it's the accepting the help is the hard part. That pride, that humble pie is always not always that tasty. I am curious, and I know that some of you, or I'm not sure, I think only one of you had an experience with an actual social worker, or came across a social worker. I'm just curious if you could speak to what your experience was with that, and if you felt like it was beneficial, or things that you feel like could have been more beneficial by meeting with the social worker. And if you did not meet with a social worker, what are some things that you think that would have been beneficial to meet a social worker in the beginning of all of this?
Yeah, so I can say that, Lance, I didn't really know what a social worker's role was. I knew they did a lot of things in many different ways. I always remember being in healthcare facilities and just watching them run back and forth up the hallways to all different rooms. But it wasn't until my father was in a really bad motorcycle accident. He was in ICU for a few months, and that's where I really learned what the role as a social worker could do for you. And again, that goes back to finding rehabs and things like that, and advocating. You know, there are times when no matter how confident and boisterous I could be, that even my voice got quiet and I didn't know it. So then with going through that experience with my dad, I was able to correlate that into some work with my mother. And the one thing about social workers, and this is probably to your own faults, you generally don't say no when someone asks for help in many situations. And again, you don't know what someone else can do for you, and you don't know what you don't know until you can ask. So the social worker definitely was someone that helped with a contingency plan, whether there was falls and things of that nature, or, you know, advocating. And I'll say this, but one of the big things I used a social worker for was I kind of went and said, hey, am I being a little crazy or not? And social workers are usually good at nicely telling you the truth. And sometimes I was being a little bit crazy. So it's a, you know, they're also a very good sounding board. So you all have a lot of information, and you're also very, very good at listening and helping anyone in those situations feel better.
And we haven't really worked with social workers from that point of view, but as Chad was talking, it did make me realize that two of our secondary caregivers, I'll call them, happen to been in the social work field and worked with aging community. So probably is, I probably couldn't have better resources for that than people who've done it for decades. So, so I have had good experience with social worker, but in a more casual way.
Hey, look, we're everywhere. We're outside your house. We're up the street. We're everywhere. So no, I'm glad that even if it wasn't directly, you guys still had a positive experience. Makes me proud to call myself a social worker. So so I think that's pretty much a lot of the conversation that we had initially laid out, but I'm curious if you guys have any thoughts or any words of wisdom for someone that's new to this, or someone that's trying to make sense of what the care partner role looks like, whether it be specifically as a male identified person or just in general, because I think a lot of the things are translatable regardless of gender, and some of the things that come along with that, especially with that that almost machismo, or that manly man syndrome that sometimes kind of comes out about, you know, having everything under control and they're the provider, the supporter. So any thoughts about any of that?
Yeah, I think for the care partner, I think communication with everybody, the person with Parkinson's, the doctors, the social workers, like communicating, you know, what you're thinking or what your concerns are. I think that's very important. I also think that, again, as we talked about before, just kind of summing up some of the things we talked about is taking care of yourself. And I do feel like some of it does possibly tie in to us being men and not needing help, and I can do this myself and I have all the answers. And so you really got to let go a lot of that stuff and remember that it's not about you.
And for me, I definitely say it's okay to get upset, but you got to try your best not to get mad. And I definitely see that there's a difference in that, because it is frustrating watching the person you love go through troubling times, for sure. And for me, that frustration had come out in other ways, you know, being a little short-tempered with things or getting irritated a little bit easier. And again, that goes back down to just being overtired and overstressed as well. And empathy, as much as, you know, we all like to believe we're extremely empathetic, and we are, but sometimes when it comes to someone you're closest to, sometimes you actually lack less empathy than you do for for someone else, for a stranger per se, because it's that you are so deeply entrenched in this journey and in your love for this person that it can blind that. So number one is, you know, try to be nice the best you can, and remember that what we're going through is because of what they're going through, and it might not be their first thought of, you know, caring about how we're feeling, because they are struggling with something deeply. And then take care of yourself It's hard. Like we all said, it's the hardest thing you can do, but it's the best thing you can do. And what that looks like for you may be different than what it looks like for me. Like Tom said, if you want to grab a book and read a book, if you want to go run 100 miles, go run 100 miles, or if that just means sitting in a dark room with the lights off and your eyes closed, then you do that. And again, if there is pushback from the person, remember, you're doing this for you, but in reality, you're doing it for them as well.
I think that was a great way to wrap it all up. I think that self-care is important, being a care partner, and also understanding that you have to respect and navigate the dignity of the individual with Parkinson's. And I think that, as you've all mentioned, that this has been a trying thing to do, but also taking care of you, and then even adding on COVID on top of that, because, we can't neglect to talk about COVID. I think that there are a lot of additional layers that we all have to navigate, but more specifically, those who hold the title of care partner. And with that, I am going to thank you both, Tom and Chad, for this conversation. I think, and I hope that the individuals that are tuning in will get something rich from this, and understand that being able to prioritize themselves is not in any way a betrayal to their individual with Parkinson's. And we can all go from there. Is there any last final words of wisdom you would like to bestow upon the people?
No, I think this has been great, and I appreciate everybody's time this afternoon.
I just want to, say to everybody watching, don't forget, if no one told you today, you are amazing. You are doing a fantastic job with the situation that you're in, and just, keep going.
Well, hi, Bernard. It's so wonderful to see you again.
Well, good morning. I'm happy to see you and happy to be able to contribute.
Before we get started, I'd love for you to share a little bit about your connection to Parkinson's.
So that's always a very interesting topic for me when I give it from the caregiver's perspective. So I'm going to say a few things here, and I hope you understand the nuances of what I'm saying. So our journey with Parkinson's began not with the diagnosis, but well before the diagnosis. My spouse, my wife, was diagnosed in 2019 with Parkinson's disease. But long before that, there had been many incidents which caused us to seek out what's going on here. This is not normal. All the way from simple things like dropping glasses consistently, putting them into the dishwasher, to stumbling, to having trouble getting through an airport as we raced to get a plane. There have been lots of things. And then I had picked up even some things in the cognitive area. There's something going on here. But like most things that are, slow creeping, you go until some incident happens. It's like, oh, wait a minute, we got to stop. We got to go figure out what's going on. And so we went in, and as I said, it began in 2018, but by the time it was official, it was 2019. And it was a difficult moment, not because of the diagnosis of Parkinson's disease, but it was a difficult experience. So I'll talk about this a little bit later in terms of what I'd like to see different. But it was a difficult experience. No bedside manner, that kind of thing. But the other thing was, and I was glad I came along with my wife for the diagnosis, because my care partner journey really was official at that point. My wife didn't hear the 30 minutes following the delivery of the message that she had Parkinson's disease. Okay, and I've found that to be a common experience as I've talked to other couples and other people with Parkinson's. And so the next 30 minutes of my journey were absolutely critical, because I heard what the neurologist said. And my wife heard what she thought the neurologist said, which was wah, 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 wah. So the journey from the office to the parking lot was extremely difficult, because my wife was convinced she had been given a death sentence. And that's not what I heard. But in addition to that, my journey as a caregiver really set off because I realized that my wife had the disease, but the family, me, the family, the children, the grandchildren, the extended family, all got Parkinson's disease at that moment. The community, her job, the people around, people we work with, they all got Parkinson's because this was something that impacts more than just the patient. So let me say two things, because I say this when I'm referring to people's misperception of the Black community. I say, we're not a monolith. So one size doesn't fit all. So let me also say that in the gender context, as a male caregiver, one size doesn't fit all. But I will throw in some things that I think are important to make this journey not necessarily easier, but more efficient and effective. So if I had my magic wand, I would first hand every male caregiver a template, which is a daily schedule for them to fill in. What is my day? And then whether you're an executive with great demands on your time, or you're a construction worker or whatever, you sit down and you say, this is my day. And this is what I need to get done. And then you carve out 3 to 5 hours a day that are now going over to caregiving. So I use 3 to 5 because I cooked all the meals, okay? And that's, and my wife can still help load the dishwasher, but you basically, if she's not up to it, she's not feeling, you're gonna do it. You're gonna do some household chores. Yeah, you can hire a housekeeper, but I mean, the notion that you hire a housekeeper and everything goes all right, wrong. You're gonna manage, okay? There's a certain amount of time you're gonna carve out to managing. With that, as a male, you often have to add grocery shopping. You weren't the one doing it because we got all these gender roles that people have. You're gonna, regardless of the fact that you're male, you're now going to have to pick that up if it wasn't on your agenda before. Meal planning. If you just came home and said, dude, that was a great meal, or even if you came home and the cook and the housekeeper had it, that was a great meal, you now are taking on either the job or the management of that job, in addition to what you were doing before. You got to change that, okay? Then you throw in the fact that there's no way I would tell you to allow your affected spouse to go to all their appointments by themselves. You have got to go to a reasonable number of those to stay informed, talk about progress, and I'll say this because it's important to me that you understand that, to contribute to that process, okay? Because you are there 365 days, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. You're the eyes that the physician doesn't have or the therapist doesn't have, okay? And yeah, we'll get them around to accepting it, but you are those eyes. And so you need to carve out time for that. Now, yeah, sure, you're gonna go through a pity party. Oh my God, my life, but the reality is you need, whether you write that down or not, figure it out and plan your life in a way that's efficient, it's going to happen. And it's likely to be inefficient if you don't. So I would put that down and say, here's my desirable day. And then I can work from that. Yeah, every day is not gonna be exactly the same, but you need to understand what the real implications of it are. So I used to, a famous business management specialist, Jeffrey Moore, once said in a presentation I heard, there are two kinds of people. There's the make it happen people, and there's the let it happen people. And I'd advise you to become a make it happen person over a let it happen person. Because believe me, you're not ready for all the things that are going to pop up. And if you're simply reactionary, your quality of life is going to suffer. And so the templates that say, lay out your day, figure out where these pieces are going to go in or how you're going to deal with these things. And that way, as the curveballs come, you have an idea already how you're going to deal with them. And that will help you with your AA, your attitude adjustment. Okay. Because you're to agree prepared. Second thing I would say is most of us are closet control freaks. Okay. And I will share with you that the volunteer work I do for the Parkinson's Foundation has an aspect that I'm not sure many of the people who are not in my position don't understand. The ability to go out there and do something towards making lives better for Parkinson's patients gives you a sense of having some control over this thing. This is an incurable disease. This is a degenerative disease. It's going to work its magic regardless of what you do. So if you are a person who cannot, like most of the world, cannot stand or handle being completely out of control, then you need ways of getting control over your life. And one of those for us has been the volunteer work, because we're doing something to do. You know, like you see, you're over the cancer side, they say, stand up to cancer, get up and do something. Because the truth is, it actually gives you some control, a feeling that you're doing something, you're making a contribution. You haven't let this big P take over your life and wipe it out. Okay. So that's the second thing. Find some avenues in which you can do something about this. And contributing to making the communities, the PD communities' life better is one of those ways that work for us. Okay. And gave us some sense of control. We're helping to deal with this thing. And then the third is identify what things bring you the most joy. So, you know, don't look at my websites or things because all you'll see is my grandchildren. Okay. Don't look at my iPad because 20,000 photos of my grandchildren. Okay. So if somebody walks in the room and says, what's important to you, Mr. Coley? And I said, have you seen my wall? Have you seen my iPad? Have you seen, you know, and the reason I say that is because you're going to have those moments when you need the joy brought back in. And if you're waiting till then to seek to find it, you're in trouble. So your scheduling, okay, add to that your joys, whatever. And on your schedule, put back in the time to put those moments back in. If you enjoy reading, put that on the schedule. If you enjoy going your golf game, put that back on the schedule. If you know, whatever it is, put it back on the schedule. And yes, that could apply to females as well, but it definitely applies to males. Okay? They need to put that, you know, recognize what it is and put it back on the schedule. Make time for that, right? Because chances are, being male, stereotype, nurturing in the environment is not your thing. So you got to put that, because you will be taking over nurturing. Okay, that's it. Okay, it's not a debate. It's there. Okay, so put your joy thing back on the list before all these other things take up all the time that you have. I've had some conversations with some male caregivers, and they talk about how much their life has changed. And I said, who opened the door and let them suck your life out? You did. You have some control over this. Okay. But you're not used to it. You're used to controlling people, maybe at the job or, work. No, you got a plan. You go to the construction site, you know exactly. Where's your life plan? Right. Put it back on the list. I probably wouldn't have said this for the first 50 years of my life, but I'll say it now. From the male side, we talk a lot, but we don't talk about a lot of things that are really important. Okay. I know we have to unpack a lot of baggage that we've been trained for, but I'll share with them that you need to talk about these things. You need to talk about the challenges you now face as a male caregiver. You need to, your support group doesn't have to be an officially labeled support group. It can be the guys you hang out with, but you need to talk about it. Okay. I know culturally in my community, we don't talk about things, especially medical things, health things. We don't talk about it until we're laying in the bed and somebody's visiting us in the hospital. You need to talk about it. You need to open the conversation. You need to let other people help you, but you also need to tell them how to help you. Okay? You can't just assume. Why do people think other people are mind readers? I don't know, but yeah. And especially amongst the males. You hear the expression, you know what I'm saying, right? You know what I mean? It's time for us to say, no, I don't know what you mean. I don't know what you expect. Tell me. And then we need to be open to telling them. Okay? Which we don't. Okay? We don't. We need to talk about this stuff more. And we need to unpack all that baggage that says you're weak, you're, weenie, if you can't handle your situation. Nobody said you're not handling it, but you're also adding extra burden onto it. Mental baggage. I mean, the pandemic brought out a whole lot of discussion about mental health that we had been hiding, brushing over. This is just one more. Okay. But we need to work on that. Okay. The gifts come when you're open to receiving them. That's been a pleasant surprise. Okay. I'm guilty of being male. Yeah, guilty as charged. So having to unpack this as a male caregiver is an important part of being able to do a better job of supporting my wife. I don't need to make her day any more challenging with all my attitude issues. Okay. Because when she is in the mood to finally say something, I have to be ready to take that, to bring it in. And if I'm lost in my fog and all the other things going on, I'm not going to be a receptive partner. Okay. So we need to talk.
I want to say thank you to Lance, Tom, Chad, Bernard, and to all of you for joining us today. Please watch your email for a follow-up survey so that we can understand if we're talking about the right things, if this was helpful, if it sparked anything in you. And you'll also receive a link to view today's presentation and other resources on the topic. We invite you to come back again next week. PD Health at Home offers Mindfulness Monday sessions, Wellness Wednesdays, as well as our Fitness Fridays. Join us this Friday for a live Fitness Friday with Power for Parkinson's. You can learn more at parkinson.org/pdhealth. And again, we are here for you every step of the way. Don't hesitate to reach out. You can call our helpline at 1-800-4PD-INFO or reach out via email to helpline@parkinson.org.